Story: The Last Letter. The Last Letter is a poignant, heart-wrenching love story that follows the journey of two individuals, Arjun and Maya, whose deep bond is tested by circumstances beyond their control. The story delves into themes of love, loss, sacrifice, and destiny, exploring how true love can transcend even the harshest of realities. This tale does not merely focus on romantic love, but also on the pain that comes with loving someone enough to let them go for their happiness. It's a story that illustrates how life's unpredictability can both forge and shatter relationships, and how some love stories, though incomplete, stay alive in the hearts of those who experience them. The story: Arjun was an ordinary young man, not particularly ambitious, but content with his simple life. He lived in a small town, working as a freelance artist, creating sketches and paintings that reflected the quiet beauty of everyday moments. Though he wasn't a celebrated artist, he found joy in his work, particularly because he believed it was a way to preserve memories that might otherwise fade away. His life took a turn when he met Maya, a spirited young woman who had recently moved to town. She had come to escape the chaos of the city and find a quieter place where she could heal from a broken relationship. Maya's heart was heavy when she arrived in the town, burdened by the scars of a love that had ended painfully. She had always been someone who gave everything in a relationship, and the betrayal she faced had left her questioning her worth. Maya's first encounter with Arjun happened at a local art exhibition. She was mesmerized by a painting of a sunset over the hills. The vibrant colors and the serenity depicted on the canvas seemed to speak directly to her soul, reminding her of a time when she still believed in happy endings. Little did she know that the artist responsible for that painting was standing just a few feet away, observing her with curious eyes. Arjun noticed the way she stared at his painting, and something about her seemed familiar. He didn't know her, yet there was an air of melancholy around her that resonated deeply within him. He approached her with a hesitant smile and asked, "Do you like the painting?" Startled, Maya turned to face him. "It's beautiful," she replied. "It feels nostalgic, like a moment I've experienced before but can't quite remember." Her words touched Arjun, who often found it difficult to explain his own emotions through speech. He invited her for coffee at a nearby cafe, and to his surprise, she agreed. Over steaming cups of coffee, they spoke for hours. Arjun found himself captivated by her stories, her thoughts, and the way she looked at the world. For Maya, talking to Arjun was like rediscovering a part of herself she had lost along the way. As weeks passed, Arjun and Maya began meeting regularly. Their friendship blossomed quickly, and with time, Arjun realized that his feelings for Maya were growing into something more than just friendship. But he also knew she was still healing from her past, and the last thing he wanted was to make her feel pressured or rushed. Maya, on the other hand, found herself drawn to Arjun in ways she couldn't understand. He was unlike anyone she had ever known. He didn't try to fix her or offer advice on how to move on from her past. He simply listened. In Arjun, she found a safe space to be vulnerable, to be herself without fear of judgment. The thought of falling for him scared her, but the feeling was undeniable. One evening as they walked along the riverbank, Maya turned to Arjun and confessed, "I'm afraid to let myself love again. What if I get hurt?" Arjun stopped and looked into her eyes. "Love isn't about being certain of never getting hurt," he said softly. "It's about finding someone worth the risk." Their conversation left Maya with a lot to think about. For the first time in a long while, she began to entertain the possibility of letting someone new into her heart. She saw kindness and understanding in Arjun, something that felt genuine and pure. Despite the fear that still lingered, she found herself falling for him. However, life is often unpredictable, and just as their relationship seemed to be taking a beautiful turn, fate dealt them a cruel hand. One day, Arjun received a phone call from his doctor after undergoing a series of medical tests due to persistent fatigue and weakness. The news shattered him. He was diagnosed with a terminal illness, a rare heart condition that would slowly deteriorate his health over time. There was no cure, only treatments that could delay the inevitable. Arjun's world came crashing down. The thought of dying wasn't what terrified him the most. It was the idea of leaving Maya behind. She had just begun to open her heart again, and the last thing he wanted was to become a source of more pain in her life. He couldn't bear to see her suffer because of him. For days, Arjun kept the diagnosis to himself, struggling with the decision of whether or not to tell Maya. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from the heartbreak that would come if she knew the truth. But as his symptoms became more noticeable, Maya began to suspect that something was wrong. One evening, as they sat in his small studio, Maya noticed the way his hands trembled slightly as he held a brush. Concerned, she confronted him. "Arjun, what's going on? You've been distant lately, and I can tell something isn't right. Please, just be honest with me." Arjun looked at her, his heart aching with the weight of the secret he had been carrying. He knew there was no more hiding. With a deep breath, he confessed everything: the illness, the prognosis, and his fear of burdening her with his pain. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she listened. "How could you think I wouldn't want to be there for you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I love you, Arjun. I've loved you for a while now, and nothing will change that. I want to be by your side, no matter what." Her words were like a balm to his broken soul, but they also brought a deep sense of guilt. He had wanted to protect her from the agony of loss, yet here she was, choosing to stay despite knowing the outcome. Arjun embraced her tightly, grateful for her love, but also aware that each day they spent together brought them closer to a painful goodbye. The following months were both the happiest and the saddest times of their lives. They made the most of every moment, creating memories that would last forever in Maya's heart. Arjun continued to paint, his artwork becoming more poignant and reflective of his emotions. Maya often sat by his side, watching as he poured his heart onto the canvas. They traveled to places they had always wanted to see, even though each trip was physically exhausting for Arjun. As Arjun's condition worsened, it became harder for him to hide the toll it was taking on him. His body grew weaker, and simple tasks became a struggle. But Maya never wavered. She cared for him with a tenderness that came from the depths of her love, and Arjun felt both blessed and burdened by her devotion. One day, when Arjun was too weak to even hold a brush, he asked Maya to sit beside him. He handed her a letter, sealed in an envelope with her name written in his handwriting. "Promise me you won't open it until after," he whispered, his voice frail. Maya nodded, her hands trembling as she took the letter. She couldn't imagine a world without Arjun, but she knew that time was slipping away. She kissed his forehead, and they sat in silence, cherishing the quiet intimacy of the moment. Arjun passed away a few days later, leaving a void in Maya's life that could never be filled. The pain of his loss was unbearable, and for weeks she couldn't bring herself to open the letter he had left behind. But one rainy afternoon, when the weight of her grief became too heavy, she finally opened it. Inside was a heartfelt letter where Arjun had poured out his love for her, his hopes, and his regrets. He apologized for leaving her, for not being able to give her a lifetime together. He thanked her for making his last days beautiful and for loving him despite knowing their time was limited. The letter ended with a line that brought fresh tears to Maya's eyes. "Even if I couldn't stay, my love for you will never die. Live on, Maya, and find happiness again. That's all I ever wanted for you." The letter broke her heart all over again, but it also gave her a sense of closure. Arjun's love would always be a part of her, and though he was gone, the memories they shared would remain forever in her heart. She knew she had to honor his final wish and find a way to move forward, even if it took a lifetime. As the years passed, Maya continued to live, carrying Arjun's love with her in everything she did. She pursued her passion for photography, finding solace in capturing moments that, like memories, would never fade away. The aftermath months turned into years, but the ache in Maya's heart never fully disappeared. Arjun's memory remained vivid in her mind, and she found herself thinking about him often. On quiet nights, during sunsets, or when she stumbled upon one of his paintings tucked away in a corner of her home. There were times when the grief felt as raw as the day she lost him, but she also felt a quiet strength within herself, as though a part of Arjun had stayed behind to help her carry on. Maya threw herself into her photography, using her art to express the emotions she couldn't put into words. She traveled extensively, just as she and Arjun had always dreamed of doing. Every place she visited, every picture she took, was a way to honor the love they shared. She found inspiration in the smallest things: a child playing by the seashore, an elderly couple holding hands, a flower blooming amidst a crumbling ruin. Through her lens, she tried to capture the fleeting moments that made life beautiful, just as Arjun did with his paintings. Despite the healing she found in her art, there was one place she had always avoided returning to: the small town where she had first met Arjun. It wasn't that she feared the memories, she cherished them. But the thought of facing the places where their love had blossomed and faded felt too painful. It was as though going back would be acknowledging that he was truly gone. However, as time passed, a yearning began to grow within her. A desire to revisit the past, to find closure. She realized she needed to return, not to dwell in sadness, but to celebrate the love that had changed her life. Return to the town one. Autumn afternoon, Maya packed a small bag and set out for the town where her story with Arjun had begun. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the trees had turned shades of red and gold. As she drove along the familiar roads, a wave of nostalgia washed over her. The memories came flooding back. Her first encounter with Arjun at the art exhibition, the coffee shop where they had shared countless conversations, the riverbank where he had first spoken about the risk of love. Maya's first stop was the little art gallery where she had seen Arjun's paintings for the first time. To her surprise, the gallery had kept some of his works on permanent display as a tribute to the local artist who had passed away too soon. There, hanging on the wall, was the painting that had captivated her that very first day, the sunset over the hills. It was the same painting that had made her feel a sense of nostalgia, as though it held a story only she could understand. Standing in front of it now, Maya felt a mix of emotions. She reached out and lightly traced the frame, whispering, "You were right, Arjun. Some moments are worth capturing forever." As she wandered through the gallery, she noticed a small corner dedicated to Arjun's life and work. Among the displayed items was a handwritten letter from Arjun's mother, expressing her gratitude to the gallery for keeping his memory alive. Next to it was a photograph of Arjun, smiling, with his paintbrush in hand. His eyes, though captured in a still image, seemed to convey a depth of emotion. Joy and sorrow, hope and despair, all at once. Maya felt a sudden urge to see his old studio, the place where they had spent so many evenings talking, laughing, and simply being together. She left the gallery and walked down the familiar path to the small studio that still stood at the edge of town. The door was unlocked, and she stepped inside cautiously, half expecting to see Arjun sitting there with his paintbrush poised over a canvas. Discovering the unfinished work. Inside the studio, the air smelled faintly of oil paint and turpentine, as if time had stood still since Arjun's passing. Dust covered most surfaces, and the place had an abandoned look. But Maya felt an overwhelming sense of comfort, as if she had come home. She wandered around, touching the old canvases and brushes, feeling a connection to the man she had loved. In the far corner of the studio, she noticed a large canvas draped with a cloth. It seemed out of place, as though someone had covered it hastily. Maya hesitated before lifting the cloth, unsure of what she would find beneath it. When she finally did, she gasped. The painting was unfinished. It depicted a woman standing by a riverbank at sunset, her silhouette bathed in golden light. The figure bore an uncanny resemblance to Maya. The background was complete, painted with Arjun's usual attention to detail, but the woman's face was only half-formed, as though he had started it but hadn't had the time to finish. Maya realized with a jolt that Arjun had been working on this painting in the days leading up to his death. Her heart clenched at the thought that he had been trying to capture one last moment of their love on canvas, knowing he wouldn't be able to finish it. It was as though he had left a part of himself behind for her, a final, silent expression of his love. She sat down in front of the painting and cried, the weight of her loss crashing down on her. Yet there was also a strange sense of peace, as though finding this painting was the closure she had been searching for. It was Arjun's way of telling her that even though their story had ended, the love they shared was immortal, living on in the art he left behind. Moving forward, Maya decided to keep the unfinished painting as a personal memento of Arjun. She took it back to her home, where it found a place in her small art studio. Sometimes she would stand in front of it, as if in conversation with Arjun, sharing with him the details of her life and the places she had seen. Years later, Maya achieved recognition as a talented photographer. Her exhibitions often featured themes of love, loss, and the passage of time, with a special section dedicated to Arjun's works. She never tried to finish the painting herself, believing that it was perfect in its incompleteness, a reminder that some stories do not need an ending to be meaningful. One day, while visiting an art show, a young artist approached her, inspired by her story. "How did you find the strength to move on?" he asked. Maya smiled softly, glancing at a photograph of Arjun's unfinished painting that she had brought to the show. "I didn't move on," she said. "I moved forward. Love doesn't end just because the person isn't here anymore. It stays with you, shapes you, and becomes a part of who you are. It's the unfinished stories that often leave the deepest marks." Maya found love again, years later, with a man named Rahul, who understood her past and embraced it as part of who she was. Though she had a new life, she always carried Arjun's memory in a quiet, sacred part of her heart. Rahul knew this, and he respected the place Arjun held in her life. He once told her, "Loving you means loving every part of you, even the parts that were shaped by someone else." The last letter Arjun had written remained in Maya's possession, a cherished reminder of a love that had come and gone but never truly faded. She would read it on days when she missed him, finding comfort in his words, in the knowledge that love is not defined by time or circumstance. Legacy. Years passed, and Maya grew old. Her art continued to touch the lives of many, just as Arjun's paintings had. When she passed away, her family found a collection of letters and notes she had kept over the years. Among them was Arjun's last letter, carefully preserved, alongside a photograph of the unfinished painting. In her will, Maya left instructions for the painting to remain unfinished, to be displayed as it was, with a plaque that read, "Dedicated to Arjun, who taught me that love is eternal. Some stories do not need an ending. They live on in the hearts that remember." Passing on the legacy. After Maya's death, the story of her and Arjun's love captured the imagination of many. The exhibition featuring their artwork, especially the unfinished painting, gained widespread attention. Visitors were drawn to the haunting beauty of the painting and the bittersweet tale behind it. As they stood before the half-formed figure of Maya on the canvas, many were moved to tears, sensing the depth of emotion that had gone into every brushstroke. The painting became a symbol of unfinished love, a reminder of stories that are left incomplete but are no less meaningful. It resonated with people who had experienced loss or carried the memory of a love that had ended too soon. The gallery that housed the painting dedicated a special space to Arjun and Maya, not just as artists, but as lovers whose story had touched countless hearts. In her final years, Maya had written a memoir about her life, her love for Arjun, and the journey of healing she had undergone. She had recounted every cherished memory, every whispered promise, and every tear they had shared. The book, titled Unfinished, was published posthumously and became a bestseller. It was not just a love story, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of heartbreak. Readers found comfort in her words and drew strength from her experiences. The book, much like the painting, left a lasting legacy. People from all over the world began sending letters to the gallery, sharing their own stories of love and loss, and how Maya's and Arjun's story had given them hope. Many saw the painting as a reflection of their own lives, where some things remained incomplete, but were still beautiful in their imperfection. A new connection. Among the many visitors to the exhibition was a young art student named Priya, who had recently lost someone dear to her. She was captivated by the painting, spending hours in front of it each time she visited. The first time she saw it, she felt an overwhelming wave of emotions, as if the painting was speaking directly to her grief. She returned to the gallery every week, always finding herself drawn to the same spot, trying to understand why this particular work resonated so deeply. One afternoon, as Priya sat quietly in front of the painting, she noticed an elderly gentleman nearby. He was looking at the same painting, his eyes filled with a similar sadness. After a moment, he turned and saw her tear-filled eyes. He gave her a gentle nod, as though acknowledging the shared pain they both carried. The man introduced himself as Rahul, Maya's second husband. His presence at the gallery was a weekly ritual for him, a way to feel close to Maya. When he saw Priya's eyes, he was reminded of the grief Maya had lived with for years. They began talking, and soon Rahul was sharing stories of Maya and Arjun and how their love had shaped Maya's life even after his passing. Arjun was her first love, and I was fortunate enough to be her second, Rahul said with a wistful smile. But there was no competition, no jealousy. I loved her with the understanding that there was a part of her that belonged to Arjun. It wasn't about comparing. It was about sharing a love that was big enough to hold all of her story. Priya found comfort in Rahul's words, as they echoed the confusion and guilt she had felt for being unable to let go of her own past. She had lost her fiancé in a tragic accident, and despite the passage of time, she had not found a way to move forward. The unfinished painting seemed to embody her sense of loss and the lingering feeling that her own love story had been left incomplete. Finding new purpose, Rahul and Priya continued to meet at the gallery, forming an unlikely friendship. Their conversations helped Priya slowly begin to heal. Rahul encouraged her to keep pursuing art, to pour her emotions into her work just as Arjun and Maya had done. He spoke of how Maya had found solace in photography, using it as a way to communicate with Arjun long after he was gone. Inspired by Maya's journey and the conversations with Rahul, Priya began painting again. She found herself drawn to themes of love, loss, and memory, much like the subjects that had defined Arjun's art. She would often revisit the gallery to study the unfinished painting, trying to understand the depth of emotion that lay beneath each brushstroke. Eventually, Priya took on a bold project. She decided to create a series of paintings inspired by The Last Letter and Maya's memoir. The series would not be a continuation of Arjun's painting, as she knew that some stories were not meant to be finished by others. Instead, her paintings would reflect the various stages of grief, healing, and acceptance that Maya had described in her book. It would be a tribute to both Arjun and Maya, and to all those who had experienced loss. The series, titled Echoes of Love, was exhibited at the same gallery, displayed alongside Arjun's and Maya's original works. Priya's paintings depicted scenes of hope rising from sorrow, couples embracing at twilight, empty benches beneath cherry blossom trees, and solitary figures standing at the edge of a vast ocean. The final painting in the series was an abstract representation of an unfinished canvas, where vibrant colors and delicate lines faded into the raw texture of bare canvas. It symbolized not only the love story of Arjun and Maya, but the universality of love's lingering presence in all incomplete stories. The exhibition's impact. The exhibition was met with overwhelming response. People from various walks of life found themselves reflected in the paintings. Some had lost a spouse, others a child, and some had simply let go of the person they thought they would be. The gallery became a place of healing for many, a sanctuary where strangers found connections through shared grief and solace in the idea that love endures even when life does not provide closure. Among the visitors was a young couple who had recently experienced a miscarriage. Standing before Priya's final painting, they held hands, finding unspoken comfort in the shared silence. There was a middle-aged man who had lost his partner to a terminal illness. Gazing at the vibrant colors that faded into emptiness, as if to say that life, too, was a blend of what is and what could have been. The unfinished painting of Maya by Arjun continued to be a focal point, drawing people back time and again. Some visitors would leave notes or letters beside the painting, sharing their own stories of love and loss, creating a growing collection of heartfelt messages. It became a tradition at the gallery, and soon a special wall was dedicated to these notes, which became known as the Wall of Unfinished Stories. An unexpected gift. Years after the exhibition, Rahul received a letter from an art collector. It was about a sketch that had been found among Arjun's personal belongings that were thought to be lost. The sketch was of a woman's face, done in delicate lines with a touch of color. It bore an unmistakable resemblance to Maya, as though Arjun had tried to capture her smile one last time. The collector had come across the sketch at an auction and felt it belonged to someone who had known Arjun personally. Rahul was moved beyond words when he saw it. It was as if Arjun had left behind one final piece of his love for Maya. Rahul donated the sketch to the gallery, where it was framed and placed next to the unfinished painting, as though the two works belonged together. The two pieces stood as a testament to a love that was not bound by time or circumstance, a story that, though incomplete, had become a masterpiece in its own right. A story that never ends. Years later, the gallery continued to thrive, with people from all over the world coming to see the famous, unfinished painting and the sketches of Arjun and Maya. Their story became a legend, a reminder that the beauty of love lies not in its perfection, but in its persistence. It lives on in the hearts it touches, in the stories it inspires, and in the art that carries it forward. Priya went on to become a renowned artist, her work often exploring the theme of unfinished stories. She continued to draw inspiration from Arjun and Maya's love story, which remained a central part of her artistic journey. She realized that some stories don't need a definitive ending to be complete. They live on in the echoes left behind, in the love that remains despite the passing of time. In the end, Arjun and Maya's love story was not just about two people who fell in love and lost each other. It was about all the lives they touched, the art they left behind, and the legacy that continued to inspire others to find meaning even in the face of loss. Their love was a story without an ending, an unfinished masterpiece that remained alive in the hearts of all who knew it. And so, the tale of the last letter lived on, an enduring reminder that some love stories never truly end. They simply find new ways to be told.